The chamber was built to make visitors feel small. Admiral Victor Kane understood this the moment the massive doors opened before him. He stood alone at the entrance of the grand assembly hall of the Galactic Concordat. The ceiling stretched so high above that clouds actually formed near the top, drifting past lights that mimicked distant stars. The floor was made of something that looked like black glass, but felt alive beneath his boots, pulsing with a faint warmth that suggested the entire building might be a living organism. Around him, arranged in towering tiers that curved upward like the inside of a shell, sat the representatives of 800 worlds. Victor had studied the files. He knew what to expect, but knowing and seeing were very different things. The Velker delegation occupied the lowest tier, their massive forms like mountains of gray flesh, each one large enough to crush a human tank. Above them sat the crystalline minds of Talos Prime, beings of pure geometric light that communicated through patterns too complex for most species to comprehend. The insectoid hive representatives clustered together in perfect synchronization, thousands of eyes tracking his every movement. And higher still, in shadows that seemed to resist the light itself, sat the elder races, species so old that they had watched stars being born. Every single one of them was looking at him. A voice boomed through the chamber, translated instantly into English by the device implanted behind his ear. The representative of the species designated human may approach the testimony platform. Victor walked forward. His footsteps echoed in the vast space. He could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on him like a physical force, but he kept his back straight and his face calm. Humanity had waited 60 years for this moment. He would not show weakness. The testimony platform was a circle of white light in the center of the chamber. When Victor stepped into it, the light intensified, and suddenly every being in the room could see him perfectly, as if he were standing right in front of them. The High Chancellor of the Concordat leaned forward in her elevated seat. She was Velindari, her species one of the oldest in the galaxy. Her body was humanoid, but covered in scales that shifted color with her emotions. Right now, they were a cold, analytical blue. "Admiral Victor Kane of Earth," she said, "you have been summoned before this council to answer for crimes against galactic law. Specifically, the interception of a Priority 1 distress signal, the unauthorized decryption of Concordat-level communications, and the deployment of military forces into restricted space." She paused. "The penalty for any one of these crimes is planetary quarantine for a minimum of 10,000 years. Combined, your species faces permanent extinction protocols." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Several species made sounds that Victor's translator identified as approval. He waited until the noise died down before speaking. "With respect, High Chancellor, I must correct a misunderstanding. We did not intercept anything. We simply heard a message that was echoing across the entire galaxy. A cry for help that had been broadcasting for over 300 years. He reached into his uniform and produced a small device. "May I?" The Chancellor's scales flickered orange with irritation. "You may." Victor activated the device, and sound filled the chamber. It was a scream. Not a single voice, but millions of them, layered together into a frequency of pure terror. It rose and fell like waves crashing against rock, and beneath it was a desperate, pleading undertone that needed no translation. "Help us. Someone help us. Please." The effect on the council was immediate. Several representatives physically recoiled. The crystalline minds flickered erratically. Even the elder races in their shadows seemed to stir. Victor let it play for 10 seconds before cutting it off. "That is the message we heard. The message you have apparently been ignoring for 300 years. Silence. Complete and total silence." Then the Chancellor spoke, her scales now a deep, angry red. "That signal was encrypted in 9th-tier Concordat protocols. No species below the fifth development stage should have been capable of detecting it. And yet we did. Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Do you know why? Because we evolved on a chaotic world, where hearing patterns and noise meant the difference between life and death. Our brains are built to find meaning in static. We are biological decryption engines, Chancellor. And we heard everything. He let that sink in for a moment. We heard the Meridians dying. We heard your council vote to ignore them because their space was too far away, too resource-intensive to defend. We heard you discuss managing younger species to prevent them from becoming threats. We heard you debate whether to quarantine humanity before we became a problem. His voice hardened. And we heard the hollow growing closer while you did nothing. The chamber erupted. Hundreds of species shouting, clicking, humming, flashing lights in outrage. The Chancellor had to activate a harmonic pulse that forced everyone into silence. These are serious accusations, she said, her voice like ice. They are facts. Victor reached into his pocket again and produced a data chip. 53 years ago, when we decoded the Meridian signal, we made a choice. We could have ignored it like you did. Instead, we spent 5 decades preparing, building ships you had never seen, developing weapons you had never imagined, creating a fleet capable of reaching the Meridians and doing what your mighty Concordat refused to do. He placed the chip on the platform. That chip contains the coordinates of the Meridian homeworld, or what is left of it after the hollow consumed it. He looked directly at the Chancellor. It also contains something else. Proof that humanity reached the Meridians. Proof that we evacuated 12 million survivors. And proof that we destroyed the hollow fragment that was preparing to move toward the galactic core. The Chancellor stared at him. For the first time, her scales showed a color Victor had not seen before. A pale, almost white shade that his translator identified as shock. That is impossible, she whispered. The hollow cannot be destroyed. It can if you are willing to sacrifice enough. If you care enough to try. Victor straightened. High Chancellor, I am not here to answer for crimes. I am here to deliver a warning. The hollow is not gone. What we destroyed was a scout, a fragment sent to test your defenses. The true hollow is still coming. And based on our calculations, it will reach the outer rim in less than 200 years. He looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species who had gathered to judge him. You can quarantine us. You can try to destroy us. But that will not stop what is coming. Nothing will, unless every species in this galaxy works together to build a weapon capable of pushing the hollow back. He paused. Humanity has the designs for such a weapon. We recovered them from the Meridian archives, and we are willing to share them freely with any species brave enough to stand with us. The Chancellor's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a cautious yellow. And what do you want in return? Victor smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. Real warmth, mixed with something that might have been pity. We want you to listen, he said. For the first time in your long history, we want you to hear a cry for help and actually answer it. Not because it benefits you, not because it is convenient, but because it is right. He turned and walked back toward the doors, leaving the data chip glowing on the platform behind him. Humanity heard a message that was never meant for us, he said over his shoulder. And we answered. The question now is whether you will do the same when the real darkness comes. He paused at the doors and looked back at the assembled representatives of 800 worlds. We will be waiting for your answer. But we will not wait long. The hollow does not care about your politics or your protocols. It only cares about consuming everything in its path. His voice dropped. And right now, that path leads directly through this galaxy. The doors closed behind him, not in the chamber. 800 species sat in stunned silence, contemplating a future they had spent millennia pretending did not exist. And somewhere, in the dark spaces between stars, the Hollow continued its endless advance. 3 weeks after Admiral Kane's testimony, the galaxy changed forever. Commander Rozembeki floated through the ruins of what had once been the greatest library in the universe. The Meridian archives stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, a vast network of crystalline structures that contained the memories of a civilization that had existed for 2 million years. Most of it was dark now. The Hollow had consumed the power systems, the maintenance drones, everything that kept the archives alive. But deep in the core, protected by shields that had somehow held for 3 centuries, something still glowed. Rosa pushed through a narrow passage, her suit's lights cutting through dust that sparkled like ground diamonds. Behind her, 2 other members of her team followed in silence. They had been inside the archives for 6 days, mapping corridors that seemed to go on forever. "Command, I am approaching the central repository," she said into her communicator. "Readings show active power signatures ahead." The response came from the UNS Horizon, orbiting what remained of the Meridian homeworld. "Confirmed, Commander. Proceed with caution. We still do not know what kind of defenses might be active." Rosa moved forward. The passage opened into a massive chamber, and she stopped breathing for a moment. The room was filled with light. Not artificial light, but something organic, something alive. It pulsed from thousands of crystalline pillars that rose from floor to ceiling, each one containing what looked like flowing rivers of pure information. And in the center of it all stood a figure. It was humanoid in shape, but made entirely of golden light. As Rosa approached, it turned toward her, and she saw features forming in the luminescence. Eyes, a mouth, something that might have been a smile. "You came," the figure said, and its voice was the same voice from the signal, the same voice that had echoed across the galaxy for 300 years. After all this time, someone finally answered. Rosa's heart pounded in her chest. "I am Commander Rozembeki of the United Nations Navy. We heard your message. We came to help." The figure moved closer, its light flickering with what seemed like emotion. "You are not of the Concordat. Your pattern is different, younger, rougher." It paused. "And yet you heard us when those who should have listened chose to ignore our cries." "We heard you," Rosa said simply. That was enough. The figure was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke again, and its voice carried the weight of centuries. "I am the Keeper, the last creation of my people, designed to preserve their knowledge after they were gone. I have waited 300 years for someone to come. I had almost lost hope." Rosa looked around at the glowing pillars, at the rivers of information flowing through them. This is everything they knew? Everything they were? Everything and more. The history of 2 million years. The science that allowed them to build wonders you cannot imagine. The art that made their souls sing. The Keeper's light dimmed slightly, and the warning they died trying to send to the galaxy. Rosa felt a chill run down her spine, despite the warmth of her suit. The Hollow is not a creature," the Keeper said. "It is not alive in any way you would understand. It is entropy given form, the natural death of the universe, accelerated and focused into a force that consumes order itself. Everything the Hollow touches becomes nothing. Not destroyed, simply erased from existence." The images around them shifted, showing a wave of absolute darkness sweeping across stars. Planets winked out like candles in a hurricane. Entire solar systems simply ceased to be. My people discovered the Hollow when it was still far beyond the galactic rim. They studied it for 100,000 years, trying to understand it, trying to find a way to stop it. The Keeper's voice grew heavy. They failed, but they did not give up. In their final days, they created something. A weapon. a device that could not destroy the hollow, but could redirect it, turn it away from living space, and send it toward the empty voids between galaxies. Rose's breath caught. The resonance engine. We found references to it in the decoded transmissions. The engine requires sacrifice. It must be activated from within the hollow itself, and whoever activates it will be consumed in the process. The keeper's light flickered. My people could not agree on who should die. They debated while the darkness consumed their worlds. By the time they made a decision, it was too late. The images showed the final days of the meridians. Ships fleeing in all directions. Cities vanishing into nothing. Millions of voices crying out and then falling silent. 12 million survived, Rosa said. We found them on the colony ships. They are safe now, on a planet near human space. The keeper's light flared bright for a moment. 12 million? You saved 12 million of my creators? We could not save more. The hollow was too close. But those 12 million are alive. They are rebuilding. They will continue. The keeper was silent for a very long time. When it spoke again, its voice was thick with something that sounded like tears. For 300 years, I called for help. I sent the signal over and over, praying that someone would hear. The Concordat heard and did nothing. They decided my people were not worth the effort of saving. Its light focused on Rosa with sudden intensity. But you heard. A species that was not supposed to exist at this level of development. A species that the Concordat considered primitive. You heard and you answered, and you saved what could be saved. Rosa nodded slowly. We did what we could. You did what no one else would. The keeper moved toward one of the crystalline pillars and touched it. Information began flowing faster, streams of data racing through the chamber. The resonance engine plans are stored here. I am transferring them to your systems now. But I must warn you, the fragment your admiral destroyed was only a scout. The true hollow is still coming. And it is angry. Rosa frowned. Angry? You said it was not alive. It is not alive. But it learns. It adapts. It remembers. The keeper's light dimmed to a somber glow. When your ships destroyed the scout fragment, the hollow felt it. For the first time in its existence, something pushed back. Something heard it. And now it knows this galaxy contains threats. The images shifted again, showing something that made Rosa's blood run cold. The hollow was no longer advancing slowly. It was accelerating, moving faster than any of their models had predicted, heading directly toward the galactic core. How long? Rosa whispered. At its current speed? Less than 100 years. Perhaps less than 50. The keeper looked at her. Your species woke something that had been sleeping. The Concordat ignored the problem and hoped it would go away. You confronted it and made it pay attention. Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, processing the implications. Humanity had saved 12 million meridians. They had destroyed a fragment of the hollow. And in doing so, they had drawn the attention of something that would consume the entire galaxy. Then we need to build the resonance engine, she said. We need to build it fast. You will need more than speed. The engine requires components that cannot be manufactured. They must be grown in very specific conditions that only exist in certain star systems. Systems that are currently controlled by Concordat species who may not wish to help you. The keeper paused. And you will need volunteers. 100 beings willing to enter the hollow and give their lives to activate the engine. Rosa thought of Admiral Kane standing alone before the council, telling them truths they did not want to hear. She thought of her crew on the horizon, who had traveled across the galaxy to answer a cry for help that was never meant for them. We will find volunteers, she said. That will not be the hard part. The keeper tilted its head. What do you mean? Rosa smiled, and there was something fierce in it. Humans run toward danger, not away from it. When we tell them what is needed, we will have more volunteers than we know what to do with. She looked at the glowing pillars, at the preserved knowledge of a dead civilization. The hard part will be convincing the Concordat to help us build the engine before it is too late. The keeper's light rippled with what might have been amusement. Then perhaps you should give them something they cannot ignore. A reason to believe that humanity is worth following. Rosa nodded slowly. She touched her communicator. Horizon, this is Becky. I need you to send a message to Admiral Kane. Tell him we have the engine specifications. And tell him. She paused, looking at the keeper. Tell him the hollow is coming faster than we thought. We do not have time for politics anymore. We need to act now. The response came back, filled with static, the signal struggling through the interference of the dead world around them. Understood, Commander. Transmitting now. Rosa turned back to the keeper. Is there anything else you can give us? Anything that might help? The keeper moved to another pillar. My creators spent 2 million years developing technologies the Concordat has never seen. Weapons that fold space. Shields that exist outside normal time. Ships that can phase through solid matter. Its light brightened. I was programmed to share this knowledge only with someone worthy of receiving it. Someone who heard our cry and answered without asking what they would gain. It touched the pillar, and a flood of information began streaming into Rosa's suit systems. Take it all, the keeper said. Use it to save this galaxy. And when you stand before the Concordat again, remind them that a species they considered primitive did what they could not. Perhaps that will finally convince them that the universe does not care about development stages or protocol levels. It only cares about who is brave enough to act. Rosa watched the data fill her storage drives. Weapons, shields, technologies. That would change everything. Thank you, she said. The keeper's light began to fade. I have waited 300 years for this moment. Now my purpose is fulfilled. Its voice grew softer. Save what can be saved, Commander. Remember us. And when the darkness comes, do not hesitate. The engine will work if you have the courage to use it. The light faded completely. The chamber fell dark, and Rose and Becky stood alone in the tomb of a civilization. Holding the key to saving everything. The war room of the UNS Defiance hummed with tension as Admiral Keynes studied the holographic display. 30-7 Concordat warships had dropped out of hyperspace 12 hours ago, forming a blockade between humanity's fleet and the construction site where the resonance engine was being built. Each ship was the size of a small city, armed with weapons that had crushed rebellions on 1,000 worlds. Against them, humanity had 11 vessels. They are demanding our immediate surrender, Lieutenant Commander Paulo Reyes reported from the communications station. High Chancellor Valora says that if we do not stand down within 6 hours, they will open fire. Kane did not take his eyes off the display. What about the coalition ships? Reyes checked his readings. Still holding position at the rally point. 63 vessels from 9 species. They are waiting to see what we do. 9 species. It had taken 2 years to build that coalition, reaching out to civilizations that the Concordat had ignored, suppressed, or abandoned over the millennia. The Kreth, whose home system had been quarantined for refusing to share their mineral wealth. The Vorani, who had been denied space travel because their logic-based minds made the elder races uncomfortable. The Telmari, who had been conquered and absorbed by a Concordat. Member species and forced to serve as laborers for 10,000 years. All of them had heard humanity's call. All of them wanted to fight. But none of them had the firepower to challenge the Concordat directly. Sir, Reyes said quietly, if we engage, we will lose. The math is clear. Kane finally looked away from the display. I know the math, Lieutenant. But math does not always tell the whole story. He walked to the center of the room, where a smaller hologram showed the resonance engine in its current state. 60% complete. Another 2 months of construction, and it would be ready. 2 months that the Concordat was clearly not going to give them. Open a channel to the Coalition fleet, Kane ordered. Channel open, sir. Kane straightened his uniform and faced the pickup. This is Admiral Victor Kane to all Coalition vessels. You came here because you heard our message. Because you believed, as we believe, that no cry for help should go unanswered. Today, the Concordat has decided that our belief is a threat to their power. He paused, letting the words sink in across 9 different species on 63 different ships. In 6 hours, they will attack. They will try to destroy the only weapon capable of stopping the Hollow. They will sacrifice the entire galaxy to protect their control over it. His voice hardened. We are not going to let that happen. Around the war room, his officers exchanged nervous glances. Humanity is going to fight, not because we can win, but because fighting is the right thing to do. Because the Meridians did not die for nothing. Because the 12 million we saved deserve a future. Kane looked directly into the pickup. I am not asking you to fight with us. I am not asking you to die for our cause. But I am telling you this. If we fall here today, the engine falls with us. And when the Hollow comes, there will be nothing left to stop it. He cut the channel and turned to his tactical officer. Captain Amara, what is our status? Captain Naomi Amara pulled up the fleet display. All ships report ready, Admiral. Weapons charged. Shields at maximum. Phase shift drives are standing by for your order. Phase shift drives. One of the gifts from the Meridian archives. Technology that let a ship slip partially out of normal space, becoming intangible, able to pass through solid matter. The Concordat had never seen anything like it, but it would not be enough. 37 ships against 11. The numbers were simply too large. Sir, Reyes interrupted, we are receiving a transmission from the Concordat flagship. The High Chancellor wants to speak with you directly. Kane nodded. Put her through. The hologram shifted, and suddenly High Chancellor Velora's face filled the display. Her scales were a deep, satisfied purple that Kane's translator identified as triumph. Admiral Kane, she said, I see you are preparing for battle. A futile gesture, but not unexpected from your species. Chancellor, I was wondering when you would call to gloat. Her scales flickered with irritation. I am not gloating. I am offering you a final chance. Stand down. Surrender the engine specifications. Return to your home system and accept a modified quarantine. In exchange, we will allow your species to survive. Kane smiled. And the Coalition species? What about them? They made their choice when they aligned with you. They will face the consequences, meaning you will destroy them, meaning they will be corrected. Velora leaned closer to the pickup. Admiral, you are an intelligent man. You must know that you cannot win this engagement. Why throw away your people's lives for a cause that is already lost? Kane was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. It was not a bitter laugh or a desperate one. It was genuine amusement. Chancellor, you do not understand humans at all. Her scales shifted to a confused yellow. Explain. We do not fight because we know we can win. We fight because we know it matters. Because giving up is never an option when lives are at stake. He shook his head. 300 years ago, the Meridians sent a cry for help. You ignored it because saving them was too hard, too expensive, too risky. And now you want us to make the same calculation, to weigh our survival against doing what is right and choose survival. He stepped closer to the hologram. We cannot do that. It is not in our nature. We are a species that runs into burning buildings to save strangers, that throws ourselves on grenades to protect our friends, that crosses the galaxy to answer a signal we were never supposed to hear. His voice dropped. You see that as a weakness. We see it as the only thing that matters. Velora's scales were cycling through colors too fast for his translator to keep up. You will all die. Maybe. But we will die fighting for something real. Can you say the same? He reached out and cut the transmission. For a long moment, the war room was silent. Then Captain Amara spoke. Sir, I am reading movement from the Coalition fleet. Kane turned to the display. What kind of movement? They are. Sir, they are advancing. All 63 ships are breaking formation and heading toward the Concordat line. Her voice cracked slightly. They are coming to stand with us. Reyes looked up from his station, his eyes wide. We are receiving transmissions from all Coalition commanders. They are saying. He paused, clearly struggling with emotion. They are saying that if humanity can fight when there is no hope, then they can do no less. Kane watched the display as the Coalition ships moved into position alongside his own fleet. 74 vessels now, facing 37. Still not enough to guarantee victory, but enough to make the Concordat reconsider. Open a channel to the Concordat flagship, he ordered. Channel open. Kane faced the pickup again, but this time his voice was different, harder, more certain. High Chancellor Velora. This is Admiral Kane. We are no longer alone. 9 species have chosen to stand with humanity today. 9 species you ignored, suppressed, and abandoned. And I suspect more are watching, waiting to see what happens here. He gestured to the tactical display. You can still destroy us. Your ships are more powerful, and you have centuries of combat experience. But it will cost you. We will make you bleed for every inch. And when the galaxy sees that the mighty Concordat could barely defeat a coalition of primitive species, how many others will start to wonder if your power is as absolute as you claim? He let that sink in. Or you can stand down. Let us finish the engine. Help us save this galaxy from the hollow. And when it is over, we can talk about building something new. Something better than what the Concordat has become. He paused. The choice is yours. But know this. Humanity will fight no matter what you decide. That is who we are. That is who we will always be. He cut the channel. The war room held its breath. Then, slowly, the Concordat fleet began to move. Not forward. Not into battle formation. They were pulling back. One ship at a time, they withdrew from the blockade, opening a path to the construction site. Reyes stared at his display in disbelief. They are retreating. Sir, they are actually retreating. Kane watched the Concordat ships pull away and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Get me Commander Becky at the construction site, he said. Tell her to resume work on the engine immediately. We just bought ourselves the time we needed. He looked at the coalition ships holding formation around his own, at the alliance that had been built from nothing, and allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy had spent millennia ignoring cries for help. Today, that had finally started to change. The Prometheus was the largest ship ever built by any species in the galaxy. It hung in space like a small moon, its hull covered in equations that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them too long. Inside its central chamber, 100 volunteers waited. Lieutenant Maya Okonkwo stood at the front of the group, looking at the faces around her. Faces of 13 different species. Humans and Kreth and Vorani and Telmari and 9 others, all standing together in a room that would soon carry them into the heart of darkness. Final systems check complete, the ship's AI announced. Engine charge at 92%. Estimated time to full activation, 14 hours. 14 hours. That was how long they had to survive inside the hollow. 14 hours of being consumed by something that erased existence itself. Massive Kreth named Stone moved to stand beside Maya, its chitinous body toe. Read over her, but its voice was surprisingly gentle when it spoke. You are frightened. Maya did not deny it. Are you not? I am terrified. Stone's mandibles clicked in. What Maya had learned was a Kreth smile. But I have been terrified since the moment I volunteered. Fear is not the enemy. Giving in to fear is the enemy. Around them, the other volunteers were making their own preparations. Some prayed to gods Maya had never heard of. Others performed rituals from cultures that spanned millions of years. A few simply sat in silence, staring at nothing. All of them knew they would not survive. The resonance engine could not be activated remotely. Someone had to physically interface with it at the moment of full charge, directing the energy wave that would push the hollow away from the galaxy. And that someone would be consumed in the process. Maya had volunteered for that role. Her neural implant was the most compatible with the engine's interface. It had to be her. Commander Okonkwo, the AI said, Admiral Kane wishes to speak with you privately. Maya nodded and walked to a small alcove where a holographic display waited. Kane's face appeared, lined with exhaustion, and something else. Grief, perhaps. Or guilt. Maya, he said. How is the crew? Ready, scared, determined. She managed a small smile. The same as always. Kane was silent for a moment. I want you to know that if there was any other way, we would take it. We have spent months looking for alternatives. Some way to activate the engine without someone dying. Maya nodded. I know, Admiral, and I appreciate it. But some things require sacrifice. The Meridians knew that. They just could not agree on who should make it. And you can? I am not making anyone do anything. Every person on this ship chose to be here. That is what makes us different from the Concordat. She paused. Sir, when we enter the hollow, we will lose communication with the fleet. I need you to promise me something. Anything. When it is over, when the hollow is pushed back, do not let the Concordat take control again. Make them build something better. Something that actually listens when people cry for help. Kane's jaw tightened. I promise. And take care of the Meridian survivors. They have waited 300 years for someone to save them. They deserve a future. They will have one. I swear it. Maya smiled, and for a moment she looked very young. Then I am ready. The hologram flickered as the Prometheus began to move toward the hollow's edge. Maya, Kane said quickly, your great-grandfather was the one who first heard the Meridian signal. David Okonkwo. He spent his whole life trying to decode it, trying to understand what it meant. He died believing that humanity would answer. Maya's eyes widened. I did not know that. He would be proud of you, of what you are about to do. Kane's voice was rough. We all are. The connection cut as the Prometheus crossed the event horizon. Inside the hollow, everything changed. The darkness was not empty. It was full of shapes and sounds and memories that should not have existed. Maya watched through the observation ports as the consumed worlds played out around them like ghosts. Civilizations that had been erased, but somehow still persisted in this space between spaces. The hollow preserves what it consumes, she whispered, remembering the Keeper's words. Everything it has ever taken is still here. Around her, the other volunteers were reacting to their own visions. Stone stood frozen, watching images of its homeworld from before the Concordat quarantine. A Vorani engineer named Logic wept silently as equations it had been forbidden to study danced in the air before it. The Telnari representative saw ancestors who had died in servitude thousands of years ago. The hollow was showing them what had been lost, what could never be recovered. And then it started fighting back. It began subtly. Whispers in the darkness, telling them their mission was hopeless, that nothing could stop entropy, that the universe would die eventually anyway, so why sacrifice themselves for a few extra millennia? Some of the volunteers faltered. A few collapsed entirely, overwhelmed by visions of despair. But others pushed back. Stone began to sing, its deep voice rising in a Kreth battle hymn that dated back to before its species had achieved space travel. The sound cut through the whispers, drowning them out with something older and stronger. Logic started reciting mathematical proofs, speaking truths that even the hollow could not corrupt. Pure reason, holding the line against chaos. And Maya walked through the chamber, touching shoulders, speaking names, reminding each volunteer why they were here. Not because they were not afraid, because they were afraid and fighting anyway. 8 hours passed, then 10, then 12. The engine's charge reached 98%. Commander, the AI reported, we are experiencing structural damage. The hollow is attempting to consume the ship. Estimate 3 hours until hull breach. 3 hours. The engine needed 2 more to reach full charge. Can we speed up the process? Maya asked. Affirmative, but it would require manual regulation of the energy flow. Someone would need to physically interface with the secondary control system while you activate the primary. What happens to whoever does that? The AI was silent for a moment. They would be consumed immediately. The energy levels would overwhelm any biological system. Maya closed her eyes. One sacrifice was not enough. The hollow demanded 2. Before she could speak, Stone stepped forward. I will do it. Stone, you cannot. I can. The massive Kreth moved toward the secondary control chamber. My species was quarantined for 6,000 years because we refused to bow to the Concordat. We watched other civilizations rise and fall while we were trapped in our own system, unable to help. Its mandibles clicked softly. Your great-grandfather heard a signal and changed everything. Your species saved mine when you liberated our worlds. Let me repay that debt. Maya wanted to argue, wanted to find another way, but there was no time. The ship was dying around them. Thank you, she whispered. Stone touched her shoulder with one massive claw. We hear each other. That is what matters. That is what the Concordat never understood. It entered the secondary control chamber. The door sealed. The final 2 hours were the longest of Maya's life. She watched the charge climb while the hollow tore at the ship, while voices screamed in the darkness, while everything she had ever known seemed to dissolve into nothing. And then, finally, a moment came. Engine charge at 100%, the AI announced. Ready for activation. Maya placed her hand on the primary interface. Around her, the surviving volunteers gathered close, their presence a warmth against the consuming cold. This is Commander Maya Okonkwo, she said, broadcasting on all frequencies, even though she knew no one could hear her. The resonance engine is fully charged. Activating now. She felt the connection establish, felt the engine's power flow through her, vast and terrible and beautiful, all at once. In the secondary chamber, Stone began to scream as the energy consumed it. Maya pushed through the pain, directed the resonance wave outward, toward the heart of the hollow, toward the center of the darkness that had consumed so many worlds. And then something impossible happened. The hollow shuddered. For the first time in billions of years, something had heard it. Something had pushed back. The wave expanded, growing stronger, and the darkness began to retreat. Around the Prometheus, the preserved memories started to solidify. Shapes became forms. Ghosts became beings. The consumed species were being released, pulled from the hollow's grip by the resonance wave. Maya saw them. Millions of them. Species that had been erased from existence, now flooding back into reality. Confused and terrified, but alive. The Meridians. The victims of 1,000 forgotten extinctions, not all of them. Free. Maya smiled as the engine's power finally overwhelmed her. The message had never been meant for humanity, but humanity had answered anyway, and in doing so, they had saved everyone. 5 years after the resonance, Admiral Victor Kane returned to the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic CONCORDAT. It was different now. The towering tiers still curved upward toward that impossible ceiling, but the seats were fuller than they had ever been. Where once 800 worlds had been represented, now there were nearly 2,000. The freed species had joined the galaxy, their voices finally heard after millennia of silence. And in the center of the chamber, where the testimony platform had once stood, there was a statue. It showed 100 beings of 13 species standing together. At their front was a human woman with her hand raised toward something beyond the frame. Beneath the statue, inscribed in every language the galaxy knew, were the words. They heard a cry that was never meant for them. They answered anyway. Kane stood before the statue for a long time. Remembering. He remembered Maya Okonkwo, who had volunteered without hesitation to save a galaxy that had never welcomed her species. He remembered Stone, the Kreth warrior who had given everything so the Engen. He could fire. He remembered 98 other beings who had walked into the darkness knowing they would never return. Admiral Kane. He turned to find High Chancellor Valora approaching. Her scales were a soft blue now, a color his translator identified as respect. Chancellor, I did not expect to see you here. I come every year on this day to remember, to remind myself what we nearly lost because of our arrogance. She stopped beside him, looking up at the statue. The Concordat existed for 10 million years. In all that time, we never produced heroes like these. You had heroes. You just chose not to listen to them. Valora's scales flickered with something that might have been shame. You are correct. We ignored every cry for help that did not serve our interests. We suppressed species that might have challenged our power. We let the hollow grow stronger while we debated protocols and procedures. She turned to face him. When you first stood in this chamber, I thought you were a threat to everything we had built. I did not realize that what we had built was already hollow, already dead. We were just too blind to see it. Kane nodded slowly. The hollow is not gone. The resonance only pushed it back. It will return eventually, in approximately 100,000 years, according to our calculations. Valora gestured toward the filled tiers above them. That is why we must be ready. That is why everything must change. Kane looked up at the gathered representatives. He saw Kreth and Vorani and Telmari sitting alongside their former oppressors. He saw Meridians, restored to life after 3 centuries in the darkness, now serving on the council that had abandoned them. He saw dozens of other species that humanity had freed from the Hollow's grip, all of them united by a shared understanding. The universe did not care about power or protocol. It only cared about who was brave enough to answer when someone cried for help. The council is about to begin, Valora said. Will you speak? I was not planning to. You should. The galaxy needs to hear from you. They need to understand why humanity did what it did. She paused. Many species still do not comprehend it. They cannot believe that you sacrificed so much for strangers, for civilizations that had never done anything for you. Kane thought about that for a moment. Then he walked toward the central platform, where a new speaker circle had been installed. It was lower now, at floor level, designed to put the speaker among the gathered representatives rather than below them. He stepped into the circle, and the chamber fell silent. 5 years ago, he began. his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. Humanity stood in this chamber accused of crimes against galactic law. We had intercepted a signal we were not supposed to hear. We had decoded messages that were meant to be hidden from us. And we had responded to a cry for help that the Concordat had chosen to ignore. He looked around at the thousands of faces watching him. Alien faces. Strange faces. But also, somehow, familiar ones. The High Chancellor told me that the penalty for our crimes was extinction. She said that humanity would be erased from the galaxy as punishment for daring to care about someone else's suffering. He shook his head. I think she expected us to be afraid, to beg for mercy, to promise that we would never interfere again. A murmur rippled through the chamber. But that is not who we are. Humans do not ignore cries for help. We do not calculate whether saving someone is worth the cost. When we hear someone suffering, we act. That is what our species has always done. It is what we will always do. He paused, letting the words sink in. The Concordat spent 10 million years building an empire based on control, on suppression, on deciding which species deserved to survive and which could be sacrificed. And in all that time, you never stopped the hollow. You never answered the signals that begged for rescue. You never even tried. His voice hardened. Humanity tried. A species that was not supposed to exist at this level of development. A species that you considered primitive, dangerous, unworthy of respect. We heard a message that was never meant for us, and we answered it. Not because we were powerful, not because we were advanced, but because answering was the right thing to do. He pointed at the statue behind him. 100 beings died to activate the resonance engine. 100 volunteers from 13 species who knew they would not survive, but went anyway. They saved this galaxy. They freed millions of souls that the hollow had consumed. And they showed every civilization in this chamber that courage is not about winning. It is about fighting for what matters, even when you know you might lose. The chamber was completely silent now. The hollow will return. In 100,000 years, or perhaps sooner if it learns to adapt. When it does, we will face it again. And we will need to be ready. He looked directly at the gathered representatives. That is why we cannot go back to the way things were. The old Concordat failed because it was built on fear and control. The new galaxy must be built on something else. On the principle that every cry for help deserves an answer. That no species is expendable. That the measure of a civilization is not how much power it accumulates, but how it uses that power to protect the vulnerable. He stepped out of the speaker's circle. Humanity did not ask to lead this galaxy. We did not fight for glory or conquest. We fought because we heard someone suffering, and we could not pretend we did not hear. He walked back toward the statue, toward the faces of the 100 who had given everything. That is our gift to you. Not technology, not weapons, not power. Just this simple truth. The universe is dark and cold and vast beyond imagining. But somewhere, always, someone is listening. Someone will answer. He touched the base of the statue, where Maya Okonkwo's name was inscribed. My great-great-grandfather heard the first signal 60 years ago. A cry from the meridians echoing across the galaxy. He spent his whole life trying to decode it, trying to understand what it meant. He died believing that humanity would answer. Cain's voice was rough. His great-granddaughter did answer. She walked into the hollow and gave her life to save species she had never met. She did it because that is who we are. He turned to face the chamber one last time. The message was never meant for us. But we heard it. And we will keep hearing. We will keep answering. No matter how dark the universe gets, no matter how hopeless things seem, humanity will always run toward the cry for help. He smiled, and there was something fierce in it. That is our promise to this galaxy. That is who we are. And that is why, when the Hollow returns, we will be ready. Together, all of us. Answering the call, he walked out of the chamber. Behind him, 2,000 species rose to their feet, and the sound of their applause echoed through halls that had been silent for far too long. The message had never been meant for humanity, but humanity had heard it anyway, and the galaxy would never forget. 50 years later, a young scientist named James Okonkwo discovered something impossible. A fragment of Earth, preserved inside the Hollow's event horizon, released when the resonance fired. Mountains, oceans, the ruins of cities. A piece of home, waiting to be reclaimed. Humanity had lost their world, but they had gained something more valuable. They had gained a galaxy of friends who would help them rebuild. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Someone had cried for help. Someone had answered. And the universe was a little less dark because of it.